All right. All right, so now it is 5 o'clock, so we will go ahead and call this workshop to order. Val, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson? Mayor Villa?
Here, and we're going to jump right into it. We have a workshop on the general fund and special revenue funds budget, and I'll kick it over to you, Mr. Forte, if you'd like to bring up Stella.
We're going to have Stella come right up and jump right into it.
Cool. All right, floor is yours.
Good evening, Stella Gurnay, Finance Director. So we're going to go through a lot of material tonight, but I will try to do it as expeditiously as possible. And there's a lot of material in your book, so just a minute on the layout of the book. The first part is the PowerPoint that I'll be going over, and I'll be telling you a lot of the detail. But we also have very detailed worksheets in the back behind the tab that says detail. There's two tabs. The first one is for revenue, for all of the general fund and governmental funds. And the second one is the expenses. So there's a whole lot of detail back there, and we can go through as much or as little as you would like. So Val, if you'll go to the next slide. And this slide is just showing you how that detailed report is laid out. Basically, it gives you the general ledger account number, the description, 2019 actual, 2020 actual, original budget for the current fiscal year, so the 2021, and then a column for the year-to-date actual for the current year, and then the department request for the upcoming 2022 fiscal year, and then a variance column that tells you the difference between the original budget for this year and what's being requested for next year. So that's the most comparable. Our adjusted budget now would include carryovers and projects that didn't get finished. Also, you're going to see some text that's highlighted in blue on the example there. That text detail goes with the next year budget request. So that detail makes up what the total is under the detailed department request, just so you can kind of follow what it is. In general, for next fiscal year, we've got about a 10.4% increase in salary and benefits, partially for the first year of a plan to try to address the minimum wage that has to be addressed. Also, we expect insurance costs, especially health insurance costs, not the property insurance, but we don't have the renewal yet for that, but we expect that to be at around 10% right now. And then, of course, fuel costs, which you're all aware of, 7 to 10%. And then FP&L has requested, we don't know if they're going to get it, but they've requested from the state to do a 4 to 5% increase for the next 4 years, so for each one of those years. So this total increase for all funds is about $680,000, all governmental funds, and the general fund is about $580,000. Just another note, the new health doesn't come in until January, so it's not with the fiscal year, so the actual cost won't be known till later on. Then this is a graph that shows you the general fund, revenue and expenses, looking at historical and then going into the requested for 2022. In the fiscal year 18, the revenues included $1 million of FEMA reimbursement, so that's why you see a spike in revenue there. And everybody's aware of how much delay we have in FEMA. And then in the 2020 fiscal year, we had CARES Act money, about $429,000. And we also had about $1.5 million in FEMA reimbursements that year. And so that's why you see, again, see the revenue in 2020 being higher than the expenses. And then in the 2022 request, the revenues are, we're projecting going up about 550,000. Of that is made up about 180,000 for franchise fees for FP&L. They did turn around after COVID more than we expected, and about 126,000 for utility tax, and then the property tax is about 148,000 if the millage rate is maintained at the same level that it currently is this fiscal year. Then on the expense side, in 2019, you see a little spike in expense over revenue. The city used about a 1.9 million to transfer to the capital projects fund for the Sunrise Park boat ramps and piers. And then also in the 2021 fiscal year, which again you see expenses spike, there was also 951,000 funded from reserves for capital projects, and some of the bigger items are we're building up for the fire truck reserve, we have to replace the radios in the new fiscal year. We also had the PD camera system that came this year, and of course the Sunrise Park Bridge. So those are some of the major ones that happened in the 2021 year. And then in our 2022 requests, we do include 637,000 of capital request. And of course, stop me if you have any questions as I'm going along, please. This shows the net increase or decrease to the general fund balance over the last several years. We've already talked about the higher revenues that came in 2018, which also included a FEMA reimbursement of $1 million. So that's the majority of what happened in 2018. Also, the same thing in 2020, there was the CARES Act money and the FEMA reimbursement. So, you know, overall, it resulted in the last several years, several larger increases to fund balance in the general fund. Okay. And this goes over the revenue portion of the general fund, and it's given you a snapshot and breakdown of the different types of revenue, comparing the original budget this fiscal year with what we're requesting for the 22 fiscal year. So as we discussed before, a little over $500,000, 148,000 of that was for property tax. And the new construction added to about $7 million to the property value this year, and the taxable value increased by 6.2%. We already talked about franchise fees and the utility taxes that had increased. State revenues are going up a little bit, 91,000. The charges for services are the admin fee allocation, and that's internal money. That's money that the other funds pay the general fund for the administrative departments, like my department, personnel, the city manager's department. So that's not external funds coming in. And then we are using a small amount of reserves to help fund the capital. In the next slide, what I really wanted to show you here, this breaks down the different revenue sources in a pie chart. If you'll notice, the ad valorem tax, the blue portion, is 34%. That's really the portion of the revenue that you can control as a commission. The bottom half of the screen, kind of the orange through the green at the bottom, is all controlled either by state, you know, actually doing the estimates, or by rules that they have that you can't exceed certain amounts, like utility taxes, we can't do over 10% for utility taxes. And then the gray piece, on the darker gray piece, the 15% of admin fees, that was what I was just discussing, that is internal revenue. So it's not really external revenues coming in.
So Stella, the ad valorem tax is approximately $3 million that we bring in. Or is that coming up on another slide?
Yeah, well, it was on the previous slide, yes, it's $3,090,000 for the general fund.
Okay.
There is a CRA portion of the ad valorem tax.
So of our entire budget, only $3 million is what comes from property taxes.
Okay. Then this slide gives you an example of what would happen with the millage rate. The 2021 millage rate is on the left-hand side, and then what we're proposing for 2022, which is the same millage rate. And it gives you example of, let's look at a $100,000 taxable value house with a $50,000 exemption. The monthly amount for that tax goes from $26.04 to $28.39, or a difference of $2.34 a month. And then if you look, that the residential is at the top, and you can follow the chart and see what the difference is. And then if you look at the bottom, that's the commercial. So if you look at a 300,000, which is about in the middle, commercial, the rate would be going from, well, not the rate, the actual tax would be going from $156.25 a month to $163.28 a month, or $7.03. And this is all based on the taxable values increasing. You're not changing your millage rate. That's all taxable values that the property appraiser assesses.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Stella, when you get your trim notice, it gives you a discount if you pay it right away.
Yes.
So is that discount taken off of these numbers, or is this the discounted rate illustrated here, or is
No,
it less than that?
this is not the discounted rate, but how we factor it into the budget. It is taken off of these numbers. You're correct. You would pay less. You never budget 100% of your ad valorem proceeds. You budget it at 95 or 96%. So that will take into account anybody that has paid early and gotten the discount. That's how you budget for it, to account for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, this slide goes into the departments and the expenses, comparing fiscal year 20 and then 21, the current year, and the proposed year coming up, and it's by department. And we already talked about the overall increases on one of the first slides. So throughout the different departments, salary and benefits will go up because of the salary plan that is built into the budget. So that's most of what's going up in most departments. There is an additional $7,000 in the city manager's department because of an election expense. I guess we have an election coming up in 2022 that we didn't have this year, so that's going up. Then also the salaries in finance, there's an increase there for the transition plan for my retirement, and some leave payouts, and you'll see the same thing in HR as you see in the finance budget. The customer service budget did go up because of us, during COVID, the city agreed to take on the credit card charges, and those are recouped by the enterprise funds, the water sewer fund, drainage fund, and so forth, paying the general fund back through those admin fees that we talked about just a few minutes ago.
We already took over those fees, correct?
Yes, yes. And then The police department is going up about $298,000 overall. It does include salary and benefit increases. It also includes one officer, which is about $66,000 a year with salary and benefits. The body camera system adds about $16,000 for maintenance every year. Fuel and training went up a little bit. And then we also have an equipment request of $6,000 for a CVSA, and I'm going to forget what that
That's the
is
voice stress
for.
analyzer.
It's voice something or other?
Voice stress
Lie detector.
analyzer.
Okay. And then in the fire department, the overall cost is only going up about $15,000, but that's because in the current year, we had retirement with some large leave payouts, so the salary and benefit increase kind of offset that, netting to where there's only about $15,000 increase in that department. The community development department also, has this normal salary and benefit increases that we've been talking about, but there's also been some extra money, $4,000 added for code enforcement, for demolition and mowing purposes, some additional postage money, some money for the special master because of the increase in code enforcement, and for legal advertising. So that all amounted to about $14,000. In the streets department, there is about a $150,000 decrease. Part of that is due to staff turnover, so we have newer staff that came in at a lesser salary than the existing staff that we had. In the building and grounds department, there's a $55,000 increase. Part of that is salary and benefit plan. The other is utility cost. That's the department that gets a lot of the utility cost, about $9,000. And the Seca Hall and Wi-Fi and fire alarm system. And then the non-departmental change, just a couple of $1,000s. And so then the next slide shows you a breakdown on a pie chart of all of those departments. So you'll see that if you look at the bottom, public safety, police and fire, that's about 46% of your budget. So the majority of your budget is really in the general fund is for public safety. And comparing that to the ad valorem revenue, you'll see that the ad valorem doesn't even quite cover the public safety expenses. So it's just kind of a way to, look at things and really see how they break out. And this is just a chart that shows what's happened over the years between 2020 and up, through the proposed and the different departments and the amounts that were increased, which we already talked about the detail on the increase. So that's kind of the end of the general fund.
Any questions on any of that?
Nope. Up to this point, no.
Okay. The next fund is the fuel tax fund, and that has two sources of revenue, the $200,000 that we're moving from the solid waste fund every year into that fund to do paving, and then the fuel tax. So in fiscal year 2020, you'll see the expense was higher, and it was because we used about $344,000 of reserves to fund the projects. And Antoine tells me that really to get the biggest bang from his buck, so to speak, that he'll do the engineering work this year and carry over quite a bit of the $331,000 and then combine it with next year's to actually do the paving
So there's no paving done this year. So we'll get the design work done and we'll double up the paving next year. to get a better bang for the buck. We'll get more road miles done. I say miles, it's not going to be miles, but we're going to get more lane miles done by doubling up and getting close to $600,000 worth and getting 300 2 years, because that's just how the cost of the material and the mobilization goes.
Stop right there. We were repaving State this year, right? State Avenue. Did that get done?
No.
Is that rolling
we were
over?
doing 3rd Street, 3rd and Carswell. I thought it
Carswell,
was.
that's what it was.
3rd and Carswell.
Did
So
those
we're
get-
doing the design work on that. We're doing the engineering on that.
So those will be done in this coming,
October 21, 22 budget year.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, you can continue.
Okay, and this is the Community Development Building Fund that we're talking about now. So it has revenue and expenses all on one slide. One thing to note that we've talked about before is this kind of the second line down. The general fund does contribute to this fund and support this fund. During the current year, it was about $189,000, but the revenues have been improving. We're projecting that about $173,000 next year, so we'll be able to cut down the transfer from the general fund to $136,000. And then the current budget expenses, you'll notice the salary and benefits was kind of higher in the current year. Well, what happened there is we had it budgeted this year for a employee that was retiring and their leave payouts, but that retirement actually ended up happening at the tail end of fiscal year 2020. So we expect that there'll be some savings there in that area this year. Okay. And then this is the impact fee funds. We are proposing to move $47,200 from the police impact fee fund to pay for the police vehicle for the new officer. And then the other impact fee funds, we're not really proposing to expend any money. We're just budgeting a little bit of interest earnings in the road and park impact fees, but we're going to build up those funds to use in the future.
Stella, how much do we have in the fire impact fee? Do you know? roughly?
No, but I can let
I
you
know
know.
it's in the back here, but
I didn't give that to you, did I?
This year's revenue is 2815,
no, not revenue. How much is actually in the fund?
the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look at.
It's not a big number.
Okay. When,
I think that's about right.
47,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we going to, because I know for capital, we are budgeting towards a new fire truck. Are we going to use some of that money in that fire impact fee for that?
It'll
No?
only be used for expansion of the service, expansion of the system. So unless
Oh, so
we're
if we bought
putting
a
a
new
new
one.
piece of equipment on that truck, we can do that, but the truck is a replacement of an existing truck, so it
Okay.
doesn't qualify.
All right. Thank you. You can continue.
That truck is going to be $500,000.
Yeah,
So we're budgeting money toward that so that we don't feel that full impact all in 1 year.
right.
But we're going to be placing that order by the end of this calendar year in the anticipation that we will then receive it beginning of calendar year '23.
Oh, really? It takes that long?
Wow.
Takes a year to build.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. The next funds are the Police Trust Fund and the Police Explorers. The Police Trust were just a little bit of interest earnings, and the Police Explorers, that's a figure that they give to us, so as long as they have, and you'll hear the auditor talk about it later, that this fund is now really considered an agency fund, so as long as they have funds, available in their balance, we budget what they ask for. Okay, and now this is the Community Redevelopment Fund. It has both revenues and expenses for the proposed fiscal years and 2 prior. The increment value did increase 3%, and so you'll see the ad valorem tax there on the top line. And then the intergovernmental revenue is the portion of Halifax Hospital and the county's ad valorem that we get for the increment district or the CRA. And then we are proposing to use just a little bit of the appropriated equity. And then on the expense side, they did reorganize it such that there's now code enforcement. We put a department in there rather than transferring money to the general fund. So we have half of a code enforcement officer shown in the expenses, and then some of the code activities, for the mowing, the demo, the other code enforcement activities are also in that department for code enforcement, for a total of the $43,000. And then Pictona was increased about $27,000, and primarily because of the utility expenses, although we will also be doing a little bit for the Senior Activity Center for the person that runs the...
Yes, so the SAC manager, Rin, he was supposed to be our employee, but for continuity of service, we allowed him that position to work directly for the Martins. It's a lot easier. So we're paying them like $80,000 and change. So I think it only fair that whatever we provide an increase to our employees, that we roll that increase also onto him as our employees, although he's been given a raise higher than what we're offering. So, but I'll be coming back with an amendment to that agreement so that it reflects what we're doing, and then we'll put language in there that says that that position will also receive the same equivalent raise that we would offer to our general employees. Also, I had a meeting with Reiner today and made him aware of what the utility costs are. I think it's important that if the city's paying the utility costs, they kind of know what's happening. Make sure you shut the lights off in a room if nobody's in there, that kind of thing. And he's talked to his staff about being more conservative on their utility usage. So he's conscious of that.
And then the admin department or economic development, the utilities in there went up about $11,000, and we also did put $10,000 in for bus benches. I don't know.
And I may actually increase that. One of the poorer looking things on US 1 primarily are these bus benches that, I have a hard time with. Some of them are a result of not being ADA compliant, and they just are in a bad position. They're sideways, they're facing the wrong direction, there's all kinds of things. So I thought maybe, we've got funds in the CRA budget, let's put some money in there to start fixing some of these bus benches at the bus stops. I don't know if 10,000 is even enough. Maybe between now and the next, and the actual public hearings in September, we may increase that as I get an estimate to see what it would cost to make them ADA compliant. Now, Waverly Media, in our contract with them, they'll provide us the bench at no cost. The expense to the city is making the bus stop ADA compliant. Because no matter what we do, once we touch them, we need to make them compliant. So I think if we clean those bus stops up, it would make a big visual improvement to the CRA district.
Also in there, you usually like to talk about the grants. So there is $100,000 for property improvement grants, $25,000 for painting grants, and $25,000 for a new one, mural grants in the new year.
So I didn't work out the details on that yet, except this year we've gotten a very low response on the painting grant. So I wanted to keep the painting grant in play for next year, but we cut that in half from $50,000 to $25,000, and then added $25,000 specifically for murals. Maybe we can get some more attention in the district for murals. And I think we even threw some money into the general fund budget for murals outside of the CRA area to try to promote that.
Oh, did we?
More. Yeah.
Good.
The next fund is the Fountainhead Incentive Fund. And right now, the budget is the same as the current fiscal year. However, as we get closer to the workshops, we may have the figure updated a little better, because the only amount that we'll actually be budgeting is the amount left. So right now, year-to-date, there's been $18,000 in expenses. So if they have more eligible expenses, then it would decrease that 552 for next year.
So we have a workshop that I scheduled for next Tuesday at 5 o'clock with the representatives of Fountainhead, because we need to talk about, they're coming due for some expiration on some milestones that they're supposed to get by the end of August. So we're going to do a work session next Tuesday at 5. Ask them to bring forward everything that they think needs to be addressed so that we get a full picture of what their request is going to be. I'm meeting with them Thursday this week. We'll go over some things, and we've got some creative ideas to try to make things palatable for both sides. So we'll wait and see what happens at that work session. But, you know, the money that you see in there is the purchase money for the property. That's supposed to be reimbursed to them for jobs. Currently, they have about 75 employees there. Some are transfers, some are new jobs. On average, if we give them, if the incentive is $3,000 a job, you're looking at about $225,000. Well, this money is still sitting there. And then if they get to the CO and they exercise the option to purchase parcel 1 and possibly parcel 3, that'll dump more money into this fund, but they don't have the jobs coming in to get it back. So we have a couple of ideas that we may be able to talk about to incentivize the use of that money, and if it doesn't get used, at some point, we need to say, look, we got to roll it back in our coffers, because if we don't use it by 2026,
Right.
I may end up giving it back to the taxing agencies, the taxing authorities.
So Stella, the 552,120 is a projection. Basically, the only thing we've received from them is ad valorem taxes, which can't be much more than about 25,000, right? We haven't actually gotten any revenue from Fountainhead in this fiscal year, have we?
Just the ad valorem taxes of the approximate 22,000, that's what that revenue is.
Well,
and
that was last
this is
year.
the expenses that you've reimbursed for them. The ad valorem taxes would go into the CRA fund itself, not into this fund.
And this is the sales price from what we got,
Right,
correct?
but we haven't sold anything.
This
The-
was the money that was set aside.
At the original
to
balance.
Incentivize
That's
them.
not revenue, that's not new revenue, that's money that's sitting there from the original
Okay,
purchase.
so that would basically be a fund balance, not
Right,
revenue incurred this year.
Right.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the tax money, as they pay it, they get that back.
Right, I just don't remember $500,000 coming
No, it's not
into
new
us.
money, that's the purchase of parcel 1.
Gotcha.
Parcel 2.
Okay, and then the last CRA fund is the Capital Projects Fund. And in the current, and this has, you know, several fiscal years, again, the first part of Pictona. And the current fiscal year, we've set aside 700,000 for Pictona 2, and next fiscal year, we're proposing to set aside 300,000 for Pictona 2. So that 700,000 will be fund balance that will roll forward.
And is the undergrounding utility part of that capital project also?
Yes, it's part of the Capital Projects Fund, yes. So there will be carryover budgets that occur after the fiscal year closes. So whatever's left then will carry over into the new fiscal year.
Thank you.
And we're going to need to workshop capital projects in the CRA, what we're going to do moving forward, you know, whether it's going to be phase 2 of the undergrounding project or some other projects, but we really should sit down and formulate a plan.
And it might be good to do it coinciding almost with the fiscal year end, because we have 60 days to allocate that remaining budget to projects. We have to do that through a budget resolution. Okay, the next is the Capital Projects Fund. And again, it's looking at the 3 years, but I'm going to refer you to the next slide, which is going to give you a lot more detail. So on this slide, we're talking about what's going on now in 2021 as far as projects. That's on the left-hand side of the screen. And then 2022 is on the right side of the screen. So you can see the detail of all the different projects. I do want to point out kind of at the bottom, We currently have $241,000 in that fire truck reserve. And what will happen with all of the ones in the 2021 column is if they have not been completed, any balance will roll over to the new year. The police vehicles have all been purchased, correct?
Current year?
Okay. And we're in process of doing the Tyler upgrade, the new financial system, which you're aware of. The bridge was done.
In process?
Sunrise Bridge.
Not the Sunrise Bridge, the Riverside Drive Bridge was done. Sunrise Bridge, the engineering
Right.
should be complete next
Yeah,
week.
that's the connector.
Okay. And then the flagpole is ongoing. And then, of course, the other Sunrise projects are ongoing also. And then looking at the new year, what is being requested is YMCA air conditioning infrastructure for $30,000, putting another $75,000 in the fire truck reserve, generator enclosure for the YMCA, a little over $10,000, another generator enclosure for the fire department for $12,000, AC replacements for other general city buildings at $40,000, and then the roof on the YMCA for $200,000.
So the YMCA roof we had in the long-term capital plan was to be replaced in 2023. So I'm trying to move that up to 2022 because of the discussions I'm having with the YMCA. And we had talked to Bill Gallagher some time ago that he was willing to put a solar system on the roof to heat the pool. And I figured there's no sense in putting that on this year and then taking it off to put a roof on next year. So if we can fit getting that roof done this year, get the solar panels put on. I sent you an email that Charlie Lydecker is purchasing the heaters for the pool. And the idea is we want to get that pool operating basically 12 months a year. So that's why we moved, that's why I moved the roof up a year to try and get all that done at one time. So I'm still in negotiations with them. I have a meeting with them this week to try to iron out some more of the details at the YMCA.
So, are we not purchasing any police vehicles this year?
Yeah.
Other than the one out of,
No, we're still
CRA?
on a rotation for 3 vehicles a year. What you saw was 1 additional vehicle for the new hire coming out of the impact fees.
so why isn't that in the 2021 description here?
Because
We'll get to the capital budget, the other.
capital budget, actually, it's in with the general fund.
So the 3 police cars?
Instead of moving it to the capital fund, like they've done in the past, we can purchase it straight out of the general fund. So if you went back to the very page, let's see.
We need to stay on that purchasing plan as tight as possible so that it doesn't catch up to us like it's done in the past, which is the same thing that we're doing with air conditioning units,
Right.
with lift stations. As long as we try to stay on course with a multi-year replacement plan, we'll be okay. But once we fall out of it, then we're going to be in trouble.
No, I fully support that. I don't see it here, and when I'm looking at 2021, we have $368,000 worth of new capital projects, not talking about the ones that we've already funded for the last couple of years from the last capital projects. It just, to me, seems like 300.
It's the way I accounted for it, okay? They're there.
Yeah, the
They're-
police vehicles are there.
On slide 9, if you go back and look at the non-departmental department, I put the police cars in the general fund, purchasing it directly from the general fund. It doesn't really gain anything moving it to the capital projects fund, then purchasing it over there, and then doing entries to move it back to the general fund to be an asset. So I've been trying to simplify the accounting of some of these things. So
So no longer we'll see that in the capital.
well, and I can refer you to show you where it is so that you can see even clearer. If you can go to your tab 2, page 36 of the expenses. And I should have mentioned this when we discussed the expenses for the general fund. In the middle of the page, you'll see a group of capital purchases for equipment. There's 3 police vehicles for $141,000. There's 2 vehicles for streets. One is 21 and one is 37. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay, and then a code enforcement vehicle for $21,000. And then the new officer vehicle, so there's actually 4 police vehicles. And then that's just the total. The $267,000 is actually the total. So there is $267,000 of capital being purchased right out of the general fund.
I
Sorry
was
for
just
the
wanted to
confusion.
make sure that we're purchasing those vehicles still, because as I was starting to say, was when I look at 368,000 and knowing years past all of our capital budget, what we were going to lay out was a lot more. And I know that we have a lot of needs still. I know that we have a public works building that wants to be built.
Yeah, this isn't the full picture of capital purchases.
Okay, that was the
We have
confusion.
627, if you go back earlier, we talked about $627,000 in capital.
That was the confusion when I went through
Right.
this.
That's just out of revenues, that's not capital out of reserves.
Say that one more time.
The $627,000 that we have budgeted is out of revenues.
Okay.
We have more capital projects that would be funded out of reserves.
Okay, so are these specifically out of reserves?
The ones in the general fund, the police vehicles, they are primarily out of revenue. We have about $21,000 we're funding from reserves.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we'll talk about that later, about how we will fund capital. Okay.
Okay, where are we?
21.
21, maybe? Yeah. Okay. And this is an internal service fund, the IT fund. And we have been talking about, and I think most of you remember from our auditor discussing it, we may actually do away with this fund and the fleet fund and roll it back into the general fund, which again would simplify, just like the capital I was talking about. But right now, it's shown here in a separate fund. So it's got the three years. The capital is actually decreasing this year, so it's just the computer replacement plan. Scott just put on order a server in the current fiscal year, so he's going to get that in the current fiscal year. Then otherwise, it's the salary and benefits that went up, and there's about $18,000 of contingency in case something happens with some.
And in the current year, we had budgeted for running fiber over to Public Works and to the fire station and to the YMCA building, I think, maybe, I'm not sure about that one, but, so that expense was in the current year.
And then the fleet fund is the next one. Again, this is another internal service fund, salary and benefit, and these funds are funded from the revenues of the other operating funds. So the general fund pays part of it, the water sewer fund pays part of it, the stormwater fund pays part of it. So that's where the revenue comes for IT and the fleet fund. And the salary and benefits have gone up a little bit, about $5,000. There is about $6,000 for some tools and vehicle scanner that the cost went up, and about $3,000 for education. And then looking ahead, during our regular meeting tonight, you'll be asked to adopt the maximum millage rate. Remember, you can always go down from that millage rate, but you can't go up. And we have to do that within 35 days of the July 1st certification from the property appraiser. Also, we need to set the public hearing dates so that they can send the first one on the trim notice, and then we will advertise the second one. So we've proposed the 13th as the first, September 13th as the first public hearing at 6 p.m., and September 28th as the final public hearing at 6 p.m. And that's what I have, unless
Is that
there's
'cause-
questions.
Is that because there's a Monday meeting or something?
Yes, there's-
13th will be on a Monday because we can't conflict with the school board on a Tuesday.
Yep.
Any questions for Stella? All right. Thank you very much for all your time you spent on this budget. I appreciate it. All right. Joe, do we want to have any discussions? Do you have anything for us before we break? We got 14 minutes till the commission meeting.
No, it's just if you want to talk about anything regarding the budget, if you want to talk about anything in anticipation of the, setting the tentative millage for the commission meeting,
Okay.
now's a good time.
Anybody have anything they want to discuss? No? All right, well then, we will,
Well, let me bring something up then. Like we mentioned before, we have about $620,000 out of revenues for capital projects this year, budgeted into this year. We have, there's monies available in the solid waste fund that we don't have to make a decision on it tonight, but I think that we need to do a work session, just like we should do a work session on the CRA capital items that we need to get done. We should also talk about some capital items in the general government area that need to get done, because we've got unrestricted funds in that solid waste fund that could be spent on capital projects. And, you know, I got to thinking internally this last week or two, after the exceptional audit that we had. I didn't know you were here.
Yeah, right.
That, you know, I'm gonna potentially go into the drop in 4 years, and then I got possibly 5 years in the drop to work. I don't
That's if
want
you
to
don't-
leave
that's
here.
if you don't drop it.
I don't want to leave here with a bunch of money sitting in the account, and somebody says, well, why didn't you do something while you were there? So the money's there, it's available. We need to start utilizing those funds to get stuff done now. While we have the money, it's available. The biggest challenge that we're going to have with something like that is the manpower and the staffing to carry it out, because you're adding a lot of projects on, and I just don't have the staff to do it. So we may think about consideration of a project manager. We need to talk about the types of projects that we would look at, everything from a new fire station to repairing seawalls to improving parks to, there's a whole number of things that we should put together and plan this out over the next 3 years and try to get some stuff accomplished.
yeah, I agree. We need to have a workshop on that, talk about the priorities, because as I said earlier, we have a lot of needs, and we all know that. And we see year after year budgeting, specifically capital projects, and seeing these projects roll over to the next year, which is no fault to our staff. It's just they have a lot going on, haven't been able to get to that. So I'm supportive of actually bringing in somebody to oversee that, not as an employee, but from the outside to oversee, so that way we can get these projects done, because this is the best way that the citizens see their tax dollars being spent, because it's things that they demand from us. Quality of life is always top three when you talk to a person, and the capital projects help provide that. So I'm in favor of that. Are you thinking of doing that in this fiscal year as well, coming up?
Yeah, I'd like to get it done in, not this fiscal year, but
Like
in this calendar year.
This calendar year?
Yeah, you know, you don't be so concerned that you think you have to lock it in for this budget in September. We can do a budget amendment after that and modify the budget and get that done. So, you know, I don't want to push it off till after the first of the year, but I do think, you know, we can do it, you know, sometime in the late summer, early fall.
Okay, yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind if it was included in this budget that we're going to pass in September.
You're not going to
So-
have, you're not going to have time to.
No? Okay.
To get it done. No, yeah, you have one commissioner that's going to be out for a week in August. I'm going to be out for a week in August. There's no way we're going to get that done in time for a September final budget
Okay.
hearing. So it's a lot easier, cleaner.
Are there any objections to moving forward in that respect? All right. Yeah, so then we'll set up a workshop on that so we can discuss the best use of that potential money, so.
And while we're at it, we'll talk about the ARPA funds.
Excuse me?
We'll talk about the
Oh,
ARPA funds.
okay.
so we might as well talk
Definitely.
about all that at one
Definitely.
time. It'll be a real grandiose, how are we going to spend money work session.
Yeah, yeah.
It may take longer than an hour.
Yeah, that's going to
Probably.
probably take a long one. Okay. You'll get with us individually with our schedules?
I'll shoot something out and see what's, everybody's available.
Okay. Anything further?
Not for me.
Anything further from the commission? All right, this meeting is adjourned. We meet back at 6 o'clock for the regularly